All right, I'd like to call everyone back into the room. We are very great. Yes? Not yet. Make your way back. We need a couple more minutes. This is your 2-minute warning. So we are just getting our panelists mic'd up for the Q&A session. And while that's happening, I just want to say a word. As you know, Brian Ide, the director of the film, is with us this evening. We're very grateful that he made the special trip from California to be here and to speak about the experience of making the film and the inspiration for the film, of course, as we all know, the teachings and writings of our own Bishop Curry. And these two panelists will be guided through some questions that she's prepared, and that then there will be an opportunity for you to ask your questions. So there are some standing mics, I think, scattered about here. And if you have a question after the questions that are prepared by our moderator, you'll be given the opportunity to ask those, and Bishop Curry and Brian Ide will respond to those. Our moderator this evening is our own Alita Payne. Woo-woo! And Alita, as many of you know, is a member of St. Paul's Cary. Among the many leadership roles she's had in our diocese, most recently, she has been the co-chair of our Council for Advice for Public Policy and has done an outstanding job in helping us anticipate and respond to the concerns of the day in a timely way, and to get the word out and how we're mobilizing. And we are grateful to Alita for being here tonight and for leading Brian and Bishop Curry in this conversation. Thank you, Alita.
Well, good evening and welcome. Welcome to those of you who are with us here in Winston-Salem, those of you who are with us online. It is such a delight to be in conversation with Bishop Curry and with Brian about A Case for Love. And I emphasize that it's a conversation. That's what they want. They want you all to feel free to ask questions and to make comments about the movie. And to that end, there are 3 microphones out. Over the next 45 minutes, if you have a question or something occurs to you, I'm going to try to keep my eye out for those so that we can hear from you and you can be part of the discussion. Other than that, my primary role this evening is to get us going and to make sure we end on time. And to that end, I'm going to ask the first question, and that is to both of you: how did this project get started? How did it happen?
I'm going to let Brian. Well, it starts with lies and treachery. So this is probably not the best. In 2019, we had finished touring with the last film, and we'd gone to the Holy Land a couple times, and we thought we knew what the next story was going to be that we were going to focus on. And we came back, and this wonderful woman, her name is Anne Maloney, who was with us on this trip to the Holy Land, and she said, "You need to meet this guy named Chuck Robertson." And Chuck Robertson is one of the canons to the presiding bishop. So she reached out to him and said they'd love to meet. We were getting ready to go to Australia for another tour of the film. And so I reached out to Chuck, and Chuck's like, "Well, listen, I'm going to Canada. We're at Vancouver for the General Convention in Vancouver. And so could it be later? I was like, oh, I really need it to be now. So I lied, and I said, I have this plane ticket that's about to expire. And there was no plane ticket. But I said, so I'd love to fly up to Vancouver. And he said yes. And then it was at that point that I got to sit with Bishop Curry for the very first time and talk about film and the power of story and our dreams of what that could be. So fast forward, we were at SEEP, the famous SEEP where COVID was spread throughout the country, and this is where the idea for the film itself came from. And it was at that time that Chuck Robertson had again said, Bishop Curry is writing this beautiful book that is about to come out, and it hadn't come out yet. And it's one thing to preach and write about this notion of unselfish love. It's a whole nother thing to go explore what that might look like. So have you ever thought about a documentary? And we said no, but we would love to. And then 10 days later, COVID hit. And then 6 months later, they reached back out and said, okay, I think it's time to start exploring that. So that was in 2020, the summer of 2020, and then we started filming in 2021.
Wonderful. Very good.
Yeah.
And Bishop Curry, I think about your time as presiding bishop and all of the places where you were interviewed. And I imagine for every interview you did, there were a dozen more projects, a dozen more people who wanted to talk with you. What was it about working with Brian on this project? What was it that convinced you this was the right next thing?
Well, certainly the $1 million salary that I was going to get was.
It's coming.
Oh yeah. It's in the mail, right?
It's in the mail.
Yeah. It's. A lot of it was Brian. I mean, the fact that we were in Vancouver, Canada, at the Anglican Church of Canada at their annual synod, which is the equivalent of our general convention, and I said, this guy came all the way here, and then he was just fascinating. And Grace-Based Films really does seeks to tell stories of real people who, however feebly we do it, still actually dare to try to live by grace and love and compassion and goodness. And I was just taken by that. And so by the fact that this guy came up to Vancouver, and it was cold in Vancouver at the time, and it was probably summer, but anyway, it was cold. I just said, this guy's on to something. And then, he goes to church in Beverly Hills, and I figured, I saw the Beverly Hills Hillbilly, and so I put all that together. It just made it seem like it just needed to be.
It just needed to happen.
Yeah, the salary was really got me.
That's what really got you.
Yeah, right.
And just to be clear, he got paid zero for any of this work. Yeah, zero.
Well, and Brian, when you and I first talked, I interviewed you for Faith and Leadership, which is the magazine I work for. That was January. You were zipping cross country doing promotional work, but it had not yet launched into that one big one night in the theater that I think was the next big thing,
Yes.
the next big step.
Yes.
It's almost been a year ago. How has this last year been for you?
I think I'm exhausted like everybody else. I think I am hopeful. I've been with a lot of people, and I think being around people gives me hope. It's really hard to make a film like this, and Hollywood doesn't lean into films like this. And the part of Hollywood that is involved in faith-centric content doesn't lean into film like this. That the model for Hollywood and faith is, if your faith is strong enough, then the football team wins, your marriage is reconciled, you find healing. And I think that's where this was born out of, was, well, that's great if that's your journey, but what about the rest of us that aren't going to find their marriage reconciled? So that's where all of this was birthed. And so then when you sit with the business people, they might agree with the spirit and the theology of the message, but their bread and butter is a whole different bit of content. And so I'm blessed. This whole film is funded by donors. So the people that funded it don't own any of the proceeds. I don't own any of the proceeds from the film. They all go towards telling more story. And they did it because they wanted the message to get out. And so that has given us freedom to let it go where it should go, as opposed to where the industry might try to carve it up. So we were number 3 in the box office in that day, in a blizzard in January, which is amazing. And it was because of those numbers that the distributor released it. It's digitally released now, so you can rent it on iTunes and Amazon and DirecTV and Dish. And they chose October 1st to be the release, to be a counter argument to the narrative division this election season. So that's why they chose it at this time. So like, that's a beautiful thing, to be a part of a different kind of conversation. But you're up against a big machine. And so I'm hopeful and grateful, and I'm also weary.
Well, and we had a chance to touch base earlier this week, and you talked about some of the places the movie's been shown and some of the reactions you've gotten. Not just in Episcopal circles. This has been shown in colleges and cities and communities. Tell us about some of those experiences.
This is the first big screening post-election, so it's a different thing than 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. And the work is the same, but it just feels different. And so I think being able to be in these places, and we were in battleground states. I mean, you all are living in a battleground state. We were in Traverse City, Michigan, and the drive there was Trump, Kamala, Trump, Kamala. I mean, the whole line. And you could feel it in the room of a couple hundred people who were they're exhausted and they're nervous about who they're sitting by or what's about to be said here, and are they going to be triggered? And then afterwards, there was just relief. And I think it's not because it's the best movie of all time, but there's power in story, and I think people are hungry for some different stories. And I've been blessed to see that a lot. Yeah.
So it's clear from the movie that love is not just a sentiment. It is an exercise. It is an ongoing effort. And I'm wondering, Bishop Curry, if you could talk about how we should be exercising that muscle right now. You talk about selflessness instead of selfishness. Could you expand on, to go back to some of what Brian has just said, people are weary. How would you see us expanding this notion of love in a time of fear and of, I think division is still very much the word.
Well, the reality is if love was easy, I suppose Jesus wouldn't have been crucified. There's a message in the fact that working out love meant confrontation with the opposite of love, facing it and dealing with it and challenging it in love. And so it's just not easy. Anybody pretends that it is, they're selling you something. There we go. That was just to emphasize the point. Well, there we go. But yeah, and so part of what I'm very aware of is that this isn't a solitary endeavor. That living a life that seeks to be unselfish, which is really what sacrificial means. Sacrificial doesn't mean beating yourself up. It means to live unselfishly. And to do that, you can't do that alone. And actually, if you look at the people, I didn't notice it until just now, all of these people in the film live in, except one, I think, and they're in some kind of community, some group of people who nurture and support them and make it possible for us to live against the current. Sometimes against the current of my own self-interest, but sometimes against the cultural, societal current. That's not hard. That's not easy to do. That's hard to do. And yet, the truth is, it's the only thing that works. As difficult as it is, the opposite is unthinkable. If we really get down to, if you really want to Well, I'm going to get in trouble, but that's okay. I'm retired. I mean, do you really want to live in an Ayn Rand kind of world where selfishness and greed actually are the virtues that we want to promulgate? Who wants to live in that for real? I mean, when you really get down to it. And yet it takes inordinate, incredible effort and energy to live which is why we follow somebody who carried a cross, somebody who was tortured. That wasn't because we're into sadism. That's because that is the nature of the struggle to live a life of unselfishness and to live one that seeks to live for others as well as the self. And that's worth doing, but it is, I'll make a confession. I'm as selfish as I can be. Oh, I'm terribly selfish. I'm handsome, but I'm terribly, and just by nature. And I don't remember when my little sister was born, but I have a feeling I wasn't thrilled that there was another little human being coming in on my fiefdom. I was only 3 years old, so I don't really remember it. That's normal. Anybody who had children knows that. My theory about the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve in that story, I know, don't worry, it's okay, that the issue in the Garden of Eden has nothing to do with gender. It has to do with numbers. As long as it was just Adam and God, or just one and God, everything was hunky-dory. As soon as you got two, that's the issue. You either get a mess or you get beloved community. And if you get beloved community, then you have the world that God dreamed and intended in the beginning. And to live for that and seek to embody that is hard work. But it can be done because the alternative is unthinkable. It is unthinkable. And we can't go there. We saw it in Charlottesville. We've seen it in synagogue burnings. We've seen it in anti-Muslim. Go down the list. We can't go down that road anymore. It is unthinkable. Love is the only alternative, and it does work, and it's doable. Here, and I'll stop there. But anyway.
And so I'm going to contradict you a little bit.
Oh, your microphone's not working.
Well, that
They knew what was coming.
They knew what was going.
Andy was trying to save me from myself. No, well, you talked about children, and I think for me one of the most touching parts of the movie was that children do seem to get it, and people in their care for children. That's where these touching stories about families that they love with that fierceness. The lieutenant commander in the Navy. What is it that children bring out in us? And what is it that children have that they get this so much better, I think, sometimes, than those of us who've become perhaps hardened or selfish?
Yeah.
What do you think?
You asking me?
Either one of you can jump in.
You were looking at the right person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other than
I
3-year-old
wish I knew.
you, other than 3-year-old you, what is it that children know?
Well, not to romanticize childhood, but there is a sense of openness for most children. That's not true for every child because children live in circumstances that they didn't create. So I'm aware of that. But if you take a child, they're pretty open to possibilities, which is why magical thinking is something that children, you know what I mean? That it's part of human development. I know all of that. But I really do think it does. Life can jade you. We call it being realistic. And you have to be realistic. You do. But even Jesus said, be as wise as serpents and as innocent as doves. You got to have both of those. And children have that capacity for imagination the capacity to believe what no eye has seen nor ear heard. That all of those capacities, and they can also get endeavorment too. But those capacities make them open to grace, which is what can help you get over that amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. That openness, which may be born of innocence, I don't know. I'm not a child psychiatrist, so I don't know. May well be the gateway to the energy that's necessary to live the unselfish way of love.
So obviously religious faith is important to the movie, but this was my third time seeing it, and what has struck me is it is not a church film. It is very accessible to the unchurched. Was that intentional, or did that just happen as you found these stories?
It was really intentional and really hard, because I think as the churchgoer, Brian wants to make it a certain way. The Brian that operates in Los Angeles and those demands wants to make it a certain way. And then the Brian that has friends that will never go to church or they've been really hurt by church want to make it a certain way. And there was a lot of wrestling with that, because what we didn't want it to be propaganda. We didn't want it to be, well, we chose a bunch of people, yay for us, yay for them, we're a part of church, isn't it great? Well, we wanted it to be hard. We wanted it to be beautiful and simple. We wanted it to be able to be in a theater, so if somebody came and happened upon it, or came with their neighbor who does go to church, that they would hear it. And so that's why in the film, there's only one deep dive story that's in the church, and it's Bradley's, and Bradley's is about the church. And I was with him last week for the first time since filming. It was so beautiful. And I said, is there anything that I didn't do right? And he said, the only thing that he would have changed is that he had said, and I remember it now, that it was the Episcopal Church that was the landing place that brought the healing. And I think we were so sensitive to, he had gone through a lot of Catholic journey there. And I grew up Catholic, had a wonderful experience. But I was so sensitive to not wanting to demonize somebody and have somebody walk away from Brad's story saying, well, there we go. There's them. That I think we probably made cuts for that reason. Al Roker was in it because he said if he's going to do it, he wants to be in his church. But even when we were with Bishop Curry, until the final interview, it was, we're with Michael. We're filming in the woods and at his home, and there's a funny story. We have a lot of funny stories. So we're filming in his home, and this is beautiful. And I won't tell all the stories, but one of the beautiful stories is we're in the kitchen, and we're filming in the kitchen, and there's the part where he talks, and then there's part where you see people doing things, and they call that B-roll, and it's just the action that you cut away to. So we had Bishop Michael putting away dishes, like cleaning the coffee pot, just doing random kitchen things. And then I could hear from the other room his wife saying, you should win an Academy Award for that. Like, I don't remember seeing him clean the kitchen. Yeah, so we heard that, we're like, okay. But, yeah, but it was important that it wasn't, part of these things are about who he is as an individual, not who he is as a job title. And so we did try to weave that intentionally. Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about the other stories you found? Because I remember from our interview, you didn't set out to talk to as many people as you ended up talking to, and you didn't know who some of those people were till you got there.
Yeah. It was really important to us that this is not a dissertation on love. Like, these are not people selected because they're experts on anything. In fact, of the 14 deep dive stories, I think we only had 5 that were scheduled when the 8 crew people met up in Minneapolis with 3 vans and just started driving. So we had the military ones because we were really fascinated with that intersection of that career calling and love. And so those were lined up. A couple of the other ones were lined up. But it really was, somebody would say, oh, you're going to Nashville? Like, Tim Shaw lives in Nashville. Let me see, you should really talk to him. And that's the ALS person. Let me see if he'll talk to you. We were in Minneapolis. We were getting ready to film the first story in 2 days. And we'd all met each other for really the first time as a crew. And we thought, well, we should practice something just so we know how to interview. Like, what do we want to look like? What does it sound like? So what do we practice on? And our sound guy said, well, my brother and his wife just adopted 3 kids. Like, they might talk to you. And that's that beautiful story. Mm-hmm. And what it has shown me and reinforced for me is that if I was in your house for a day or your house for a day or yours, like, it would be enough. And I think there's power in that. And I think that was really intentional. And that's why 95% of this movie is ordinary folks doing ordinary things. So that way the rest of us ordinary folks can be like, okay, I can do that. So it really was trusting the Holy Spirit along the way.
So I know we're not supposed to have favorites, but among those deep dives, I know my favorite was Josie. I'm going to name that.
That's an easy, politically correct one.
Well, no,
Yeah.
but and I will just say there's that moment where she gives you that look over the soldiers or the dolls.
Yeah.
That was just like,
Yeah.
I felt it through the screen.
Yeah.
And in the editing room, I'm like, turn that volume up.
Yeah.
I'm giving just a little extra. Yeah.
That was great.
Yeah.
Do either of you have a favorite from the deep dives? One that still resonates with you in particular?
Gosh. I have moments. You know, we're sitting with the refugee story, and we're with the family the whole day, and then Edna comes in the second part of the day. And we're outside, and we're filming, and I don't speak very much Spanish at all. And so she's talking, and then Kennedy translates for us. And there was a moment where she's talking about the difficulty of the transit, and her daughter runs to the mother of the Kennedy family mother to be in her arms, because she's saying it in Spanish, her daughter can understand what she's reliving. And while she's talking through the whole part of her interview, I realized that most of the time I didn't need Kennedy to translate for the point of the story to come through.
Yeah.
You didn't need the words. And that was really impactful to me. Like I said, all of them were, but I just remember being in that moment. And then just quickly, the Marine story, when he's talking about those challenges, I'm thinking of my family members that are military. And I think that there is power. One of the beautiful things about story to me is that it introduces you to a world or a life experience that you might normally go yourself. And it does it in a safer way because you're not being told anything. It's just Brad's story or Sample's story. And they're talking about their challenges re-emerging into normal life. And I'm thinking, like, you just gave voice to a whole lot of people that don't feel safe enough to say that out loud in front of a camera that's right here. And I thought, that's going to serve a lot of people who don't feel that safe. And so I think that moment that really stuck out to me too. Yeah.
Anything for you?
Well, you know, I mean, I know there's some, they couldn't, how many people did y'all interview? 300?
Oh, people in the street, it was about 250.
250 people all total. So, I mean, we'd
Yeah.
still be, this would be longer than
Yeah.
the Ten Commandments movie. I mean, we would have been here forever. What surprised me and stands out is that people were not, when they grasped unselfish love, when they got it, and they got it quickly, they weren't afraid to talk about it. And sometimes we in the church are afraid to talk about it because we think people have heard it too much. The reality is they haven't. They wanted to talk about it. Just the people you all grabbed, was it the Brooklyn Bridge? What was
Yeah,
it? It was the Brooklyn Bridge. New Yorkers don't talk about, this wasn't in the South where religion is on the lips and drips off automatically. I mean, these were New Yorkers. People who would walk over you. I got to tell you, when I first got elected presiding bishop, I kept running into people in New York because they run fast. I mean, they walk fast, and I kept stumbling, and I would hold the door for people, and 20 people would come through, and it was So to get New Yorkers to talk about love as passionately as they did is stunning and remarkable, and it says something about our deepest hope and deepest possibilities. I mean, that was some of the hopeful stuff in there was the fact that they were willing to talk. I mean, even the famous people who did, you know, the famous ones, which you held to the end brilliantly, they wanted to do this. They actually wanted, they said, nobody ever asked us about this. And they wanted to do, which tells us something. Sometimes we're afraid of the good news. Yeah. And you know what? It's still good news.
So the willingness of people to talk to people on the street, because that also struck me. It's if someone comes up to me on the street with a microphone and a camera and says, I want to talk to you about love.
Well, yeah.
But what else about this surprised you or struck you as not how you expected it might go?
Well, I wasn't as surprised, partially because I had after the royal wedding, I had more conversations with people and more conversations with people, I mean, on airplanes and wherever I was. And one of the most consistent things that I heard, which is what attracted me to the movie, was the number of people who were not coming, I don't think, out of a Christian or necessarily a religious background, who said, I didn't know that Christianity was about love. Wow. That was a piece of data I didn't see that. I mean, I didn't see that one coming. And so to see people willing to talk about love, I said, wait a minute. I mean, it's out in the Bible. I mean, that's clear. But this is the most ecumenical interfaith. This is human. It cuts across all, you know what I mean? It's, everybody wants to be loved. I mean, you know when you're loved, it feels good. And there's a reason for that. We were made for that. I think the Bible says God is love. I could be wrong now. Y'all check me. But there's something deep about that that's not just kind of shallow and, you know, nice and all that kind of stuff. There's something really deep about that that touches us regardless. It moves beyond all our religious traditions, all our political ideologies. It goes deep, and I think that's why New Yorkers responded to it, and that's a tough crowd. And they. Yeah.
Oh, can I add something to that? Yes, please. The genius of Bishop Curry referencing it as unselfish love, and we were intentional about using those two words together, because I think you hear love, you default, and it did force people to, because you don't hear it in that form. And so it forced people to get out of, well, I think I know what they want me to say, so I'm going to say it because the camera's on, and like, okay, I got to think about this a little bit. So that was beautiful, and that was us just taking his words out. And I think to your point, you know, we never asked anybody what their political, where they were on the spectrum. I have no idea outside of one man on the street where they were politically. We never asked them if they attended church. We never, because it wasn't about that. And across the board, there's skepticism, as you said. And does anybody know the Borat movies? Ever heard of those movies? So the whole point of that is that they film you on the street, make you look foolish. And so I think everybody's hyper skeptical when the camera, because it's a big, but as soon as they believed that we were about what we were about, whether they agreed or not, then they talked. And across, all over the country, the first sense was, you want to know what I think?
Yeah.
Right? The whole world's telling me what to think, and you want to know what I think, and then the vulnerable things. And I think there's power in that individually and in our church work, and people desperately, they want to be heard, and so I think there was power in that, to just give them a voice. Yeah.
Well, and you asked them, perhaps to me, one of the hardest questions was, you, perhaps in the B-roll, perhaps it was trimmed, You don't ever say it's 1 Corinthians.
No.
But you ask them to say, what speaks to you? Love is patient, love is kind. So let me turn that question on you two.
Oh, geez.
Oh.
If you're going to look at 1 Corinthians, which one strikes you? What strikes you?
Now I'm running through them in my head.
Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. You put people on the spot with this
It's a lot
question,
easier to ask.
so-
It's a lot easier to ask.
Let me just turn that on you all.
It honestly makes me a little emotional thinking about it. Like I'm reading through those and thinking about the world like today that we're living in. And I had this beautiful conversation with the gentleman I think that's going to ask a question in a little bit out in the hallway. And gosh, I mean, I think the summary of them to me is the fact that love never fails. Like those are all the doings and the things that it shouldn't be and it doesn't do. But I think you're right that like it can't, right? It can't. So maybe love never fails for me.
I was going to say that.
It's a good
I really was.
It's a good answer.
Well, thank you all for coming. And
Yeah, that's recorded, right? That was recorded.
Yeah. I am going to encourage anyone who has a question to make their way to the microphone because we have just a few more minutes before we wind up this conversation. Yes, indeed. Is that David Bland?
You got it.
All right.
Well, having seen the film for the second time, I saw it for the first time. Incredible, emotionally driving. And the question I have, not just for you all, but I would really like for your recommendation. How do we make this document available and used in a completely open interfaith effort? If we don't bring all our faiths together, I don't care how great the Episcopal Church is, we ain't gonna get it. So what do you all think about how we bring the Jews, the Christians, the Muslims, the Wiggins, the whole banana, how do we bring them to see and interact?
It almost felt like a plant. 'Cause here's how you can help. So thank you for that. So the film is available, so logistically, the film is available for rent in all those platforms. Anywhere you can rent it, the Avengers, you can rent the film. And we purposely told the distributor it's $5.99, and there's no price difference to host 400 people at a community center to do that. And that was really important to us. So we did not want a price point to keep it away from people. I think that word of mouth is the most powerful thing. When we say something, it sounds like it's propaganda because they're the filmmakers. When you say something and you tell somebody in Denver and you say to your folks across the street and they see it, that's how this works. We're never going to have the $100 million marketing campaign that Hollywood has for vampire movies. So it really does become the power of word of mouth. We are going to be together in February, I think, at a very large temple, Jewish temple, that's going to do the same thing in that space in Chicago, the largest temple in Chicago, right? And I've been invited by, I think, 5 different denominations in the last 45 days to come be a part of screenings. And colleges, I just found out Notre Dame used it at the university as a university-wide conversation of how do they live together and navigate these times. It's through community. I mean, it really is. And so I will give you a little, this is not emotional, but there's some logistical things so you know. On the website, there are a whole bunch of free tools to use, and we didn't create these, so these are good. Yeah, so I'm not, they're free and available for download. So there's a guide for religious houses that want to break it up. And some churches, I was in Cincinnati a couple days ago, and they've done it over a 7-week period, one chapter at a time, so they could really unpack it. This is broken down by chapter, and it's free, and there's a few on the table out there. One of the other things that's been really beautiful is our CFO is a very right-brain, finance, logistics guy. And so he was thinking about this as we were putting it together, and he's got the whiteboard that he works from every day of what are the tasks to do. So he said, I'm going to put on my whiteboard every day to seek an act of unselfish love. And what he found is by day 10, it became a habit. So there's a bunch of these on the tables. This is just a 30-day journal with the prompts to invite people, and all of you can take one, to what does that look like every day to do the things that Bishop Michaels, and you start seeing it differently. There's the same thing as discussion guide. An educator saw the film and he's like, this needs to be used in schools. We were just at the National Episcopal Association of Schools last week. They're going to start using the schools. There's a discussion guide for your youth groups for free. These are outside on the table. They're all free. It's word of mouth. It really is. I had something really beautiful and I forgot it. Yeah, those are, this is the last thing. These are on the table too. So we were at the Diocesan Convention in Nevada 4 weeks ago, and we're doing a little conversation afterwards, and the Bishop of Nevada had printed these wristbands that says A Case for Love on it. And she said, here was the directive. So she passed one out to everybody at the convention. Here's the directive. Put one on your wrist, and every time you see or create an act of unselfish love, switch wrists, and you will start seeing the world differently. So I asked if we could steal it, and she said yes. So we bought a bunch. So those are on the table. They're free outside as well. We're trying to create every tool that we can come up with that helps. So if you have ideas, the whole point of this is to be of service. There was a school in Fort Lauderdale, secular school, middle school, that brought us out, and they said, the social dynamic in the school is unlike anything they've seen in years. Like, it is really pretty toxic. So they only used 8 minutes. They only used the man on the street things because they're middle school kids and they're not going to sit through. So I would just invite you, for whatever way that might look. A couple days ago we were brainstorming what would it look like if we did a national call to have screenings across the country on Inauguration Week, to counter that kind of narrative, for all of us to be together. So they're reaching out to National Cathedral to see if Randy might be the anchor for that, and we might just use the opening in the last chapter for that. So it's any ideas, we are open to those.
Great, wonderful. We are very close to being out of time, and I did want to ask the two of you, what haven't I asked? Could you go to a microphone, please, so we can hear the question? Thank you.
I thought he was we're done.
Yeah.
I'm watching the clock, and we are almost
Well, we
done.
get to keep going. This is great.
So, Christy.
Is that Chip?
Bishop Curry, Chip Edens.
Maybe so.
So good to see you.
Good to see you, man.
Let's go back in time for just a minute if we can. Trinity Wall Street, 1997. You were the preacher. The theme was acquiring a listening heart. It was Frank Griswold's first moment, and you were the preacher. In your sermon, I don't remember any of my sermons, but I remember this one that you preached. Our salvation is in our story. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. So, as we think about the next many years in a growing, skeptical, hurting, secular world, what's the story that you want us to tell?
that will be our salvation. And I'm going to, we've known each other for a little while. So I'm going to tell you to not say it's all about love. So.
But it is.
I know it is. I know it is. I know it is. But
Yeah.
with all that you have seen and been through and all the different places and spaces, that story was so convicting. Do you remember that sermon that you preached?
I remember.
About holding him. This is who I am. This is who you really are. So what does the church think it is? And who do you think the church really is? And what's the story we need to tell to a hurting world?
No matter what anybody says, each one of us was made by the hand of the God who the Bible says is love, which means we were made by love, to be loved, and to love. And we will discover the secret of life when we live in the power of that love. It's that simple, and it works.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to ask if either of you have anything I've not asked, that's not been asked by folks here, that you want folks to take home with them.
I have two things, so he can have the last word. One more is logistical. Sorry, my mind races with all these things I'm supposed to say. There are cards out there too. So when you asked of like what else you can do, it really is, if you have a screening or if you have a reflection, to post about it, and then there's a tag. You can see it right here on the Instagram or Facebook of, it's just at A Case for Love movie. Like those things cut through the noise too, and it's the overlapping of those. So I would invite you to share, if you have any sentiment, to put it in social media, because those things get bounced around and they do get heard. These shirts that you might have seen out there, they were designed, you probably saw us, we were wearing them in the crew. So it was what we wore while we were traveling across country, inviting people to talk about these things. And they blew up. They became this really cool, beautiful thing. So I wear them almost every day. And on airplanes and at the gym, in every state that I've been in, people look. Almost every day they say thank you quietly, but you can see the wheels turning. And it has forced me to be the best version of myself, or attempt to be. But it also becomes like, what is the thing that I need to put out there? And a Nike symbol, like, isn't enough all the time in my world. So I've been intentional about what is the message, whether I'm talking or not, that I'm putting out. So these t-shirts, so there are gifts to donors now. We're not a t-shirt store. So we brought some. So if you feel like you would like to have one, they're $100 on the website, not because they're worth $100, but that's how we fund this work. But they're $50 here, and you could do it on Venmo or whatever, and those donations are helpful. So I don't want to take things home. So if you want the booklets, take them. They're free. Those things are helpful. The other thing is I have a gift that I'm super excited about that I brought all the way from Los Angeles carefully to give to Bishop Curry as a thank you for doing the film and for his retirement. And you all get to witness.
What is this?
Mm-hmm.
Oh. Is it going to jump out at
Yeah,
me?
yes.
Is it?
Yep.
Oh, it's the pup. Oh, wait, no, what is it? Oh. Oh. Wait a minute. There.
So in the making of the film, this animator was amazing.
Yeah.
And they cut little teeny pieces and with such care with all these. And he repurposed a leg from this person to make the football of this person. So there wasn't much to salvage. But I said, is there anything that you have left?
Wow.
And so he has the dolls from the attic scene. And he has Josie and young Michael at the cemetery, looking at the grave of his mother. And so those were the only things that we were able to salvage. So we wanted you to have
That's
that.
awesome, man.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, brother. Yeah. And Josie just had her 90th birthday, the end of September.
Blessing, blessing.
You know, I mean, I hope that this film, I mean, we really did, and Brian's just been, the team, I wish you could see the whole crew. They're just remarkable folk. They got in this and just kind of committed themselves to this. And I mean, nobody got rich. This wasn't about that kind of stuff. Nobody got anything out of it in terms of worldly kinds of. They got passionate about this, and I mean, they were like on the road forever. I mean, and I just want to correct one thing that Brian said. He got the story wrong that about in the house. It wasn't washing the dishes. Not that I'm good at that, but it wasn't that. It was actually taking the garbage out, moving the garbage. Just told on myself, yeah.
That's right. That's right.
But if I believe there really will be, I'll say some of this tomorrow, but there really can be a genuine revival of faith. Certainly for us as Christians, but I think this is an ecumenical interfaith thing. Nobody has a copyright on love. No religious tradition, nobody. And I think as our faith becomes more and more the unselfish way, I remember reading in seminary, y'all remember, anybody remember the Cloud of Unknowing? I remember reading that, and I don't know what it meant, but anyway, I love the title, but actually I do kind of have it. But there was something about the cloud of unknowing what you think you know and discovering what is truly to be known. I mean, it's deep stuff. I think there is incredible power in the way of unselfishness. And if you actually look deeply at most of the religious traditions of the world, the major ones, the path to moving beyond self-centeredness seems to be at the center of most of them. We have a whole season about it called Lent. We actually do. We have in the baptismal liturgy language about moving into the unselfish, sacrificial way of Christ. It's all over. And it's not just in Christianity, got it from Judaism. And Islam got it from Judaism, Christianity, and other teachings. I mean, if you look, it's all over the place. Now, it's like one time, I'll never forget going to see a Republican congressman here in North Carolina about some immigration issues. I was bishop in the Council of Churches got us to, you may have been the one that got me to do this, if I remember correctly, now that I think about it. But anyway, I went to see this particular congressman. He was very conservative, and I'll never forget him. At the end, I said to him, I said, look, what we're talking about, I said, I know the Pentecostal bishop had been here with you before, and the Roman Catholic bishops coming. He said, no, the Roman Catholic bishop's already been here. You're the third bishop. I said, look, when a Pentecostal bishop, a Roman Catholic bishop, and an Episcopal bishop come at you and they're not walking into a bar for a joke, pay attention. Pay attention. And I really do think that this love, this way of unselfish sacrificial love, does have the capacity to liberate all our traditions, to find the depth and not just to swim at the surface. And you know what? It's the only thing that's going to save us all. Amen. It is. And it's gonna. And if we who follow the King of Love, I love that hymn, the King of Love, my shepherd is, whose goodness faileth never. I nothing lack if I am his, and he is mine forever. If us, we who were church folk do that, the world will believe. The world will believe. And that's probably good enough for any church or any religious tradition to help us believe again in the power of love and the source of that love. So thank y'all for sitting through this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for being here.
Yeah.
What a pleasure.
Can I, before you all step away, can I take a selfie with this group? This is my memory thing. So, okay. I didn't wait to see if you said yes. But so I'll do it 2 different ones because this is a big group. That's great.
He's a longer arm, he does. I don't think we have to.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yay.
Thank you all. Good night. You got
That's
the-
great.
Oh,
Thank you.
great. Isn't that
I wrapped in my
beautiful?
Thank you all for coming. Special thanks to Alita Payne and Brian Ide and Bishop Curry. And as you're making your way out, I did want to make an announcement. Someone new to the diocese is here tonight, the new director of Episcopal Farm Worker Ministry, Mauricio Chenlo is here. Mauricio, can you wave if you're in the, or he may be at the farm workers booth, but if you could stop by and just say hello and welcome him to our diocese. The Farm Workers Ministry is based in East Carolina, but it's a partnership that we share. And so please take a look for him on your way out and introduce yourself and welcome him. Thanks so much.